Welcome back, everybody. I got a different video for you today. No new purchases to show you. I wanted to actually kind of go through some of my collection in the next couple of months as I'm kind of saving money up for a couple of card shows coming up here locally, to be able to kind of go all in on looking for cards for my vintage sets. So not too many new purchases will be coming this way, but I'm going to do some different videos kind of showing some cards that either I've maybe shown before and haven't really told a story about, or cards I've never shown on this channel. We're going to start with another Diamond Star card, and I'm going to actually talk a little bit about his Hall of Fame induction and the story behind it, because it's a little bit interesting when you kind of look at it. This is Jim Bottomley. He played primarily for the St. Louis Cardinals during the 1920s and early 30s, but he also played for the Cincinnati Reds and also finished back in St. Louis with the Browns, and was also a player manager in his final season in 1937 with St. Louis Browns. Jim Bottomley was part of 4 teams that went to the World Series, 2 of which they won in 1926 and 1931. Jim Bottomley is a kid that grew up, or a person that grew up here in Illinois. He actually dropped out of high school at the age of 16 and started playing semi-pro so he could start earning money for his family. So not an uncommon story, I think, for people who were in the early part of the last century. Just that was often their path to Major League Baseball, as they dropped out of school because they're really good at it and could make money playing baseball. So he signed with the Cardinals in 1920, debuted 2 seasons later. He was the NL MVP in 1928. After his retirement from baseball, he went on to sign for the Chicago Cubs as a scout for many years until he had a heart attack and retired, and later died at the age of 59. He twice led the league in RBIs, once led the league in home runs. He has a .310 career average. Jim Bottomley was elected not by the Writers Association, but by the Veterans Committee in 1974. And what's interesting about that story is during this period of time, through about 1970 to 1976, the Veterans Committee was under a lot of scrutiny and were accused by the Writers Association of cronyism, in that there were some of the leaders of the Veterans Committee were voting in their previous teammates and guys that, from the writer's perspective, weren't really Hall of Fame worthy, or probably were in the Hall of Very Good. In this case, Jim falls in that category. He had a WAR of 35.8, which, by our standards now, we probably wouldn't even consider that someone for the Hall of Fame, except for maybe some rare occasions like relievers. Sometimes WAR doesn't really capture their full picture of their true value to the team. So Jim benefited from having a former teammate. This is Frankie Frisk, pictured here on a Worldwide Gum card from 1933. So if you're not familiar with the Worldwide Gum cards, it looks like a Gowdy card, but it's actually produced in Canada. It'll say such as on the back of the card. It's a little more scarce than actually the Gowdy cards. The Gowdy cards still tend to be more collectible in general, but if you're looking for like kind of scarcity of that era of the same card, you probably would go after the Worldwide Gum cards. So anyway, here's a Worldwide Gum card. This one's got a nice hole right in the middle of it. Looks like somebody took a hole puncher and hit it. So that's why it's rated all the poor 1 from SGC in one of their old grading scales and one of their old holders. But anyway, Frankie Frisk played both for the St. Louis Cardinals, but prior to that, the New York Giants. And he and fellow teammate Bill Terry were kind of leading the Veterans Committee at that time. And in their years between 1970 and 76, they elected 7 former teammates on there. And I'll kind of go through it. I have pictures of the ones that played for the Cardinals, but not for the Giants. So I'll put kind of Frankie in the back here, while we'll show some of the guys that put out. Now, Frankie and Bill were legitimate Hall of Famers. That wasn't the problem. It was just more their advocacy on these veteran committees that were kind of called into scrutiny because of players like Jess Pop Haynes, was a Cardinal pitcher for all of his career in the 20s and 30s, part of the Gas House Gang too. His career WAR was 32.6. He did have 2 seasons of winning 20 games or more, but never was really ranked very high in the MVP voting. I think he had 1 year where he got enough MVP votes to even make the list. Other than that, he never was. He was just like a really kind of middle or top of the guy rotation, maybe a 2 and a 3 at the best during his highlight of his career. But because of the advocacy of Frankie Frisk back there, I'll move Jim a little bit so we can see him a little bit and move Frankie up. He advocated, for his inclusion into the Hall of Fame. So he was made it in 1970. Dan Bancroft, who played for the Giants, who, oddly enough, Frankie Frisk and also Bill Terry, I think, were teammates of during his time, got included in. He had the highest WAR of this group at 49.7, so maybe he might have been one that could have been considered. Other ones that were included, I'm going to take down Pop and put up Chick Haffey. Chick Haffey played primarily with the Cardinals, but finished his career at Cincinnati. Here he is in a 1934 Gowdy card. Oh, I forgot to mention, Pop's on a 1940 play ball card. He's on the retired players of this part of it, which are the high series cards. Chick Haffey is a 1934 Gowdy card you pictured here, and I've talked about this card, at least getting it before. Had a career WAR of just 31.2, so he and Dave Bancroft made the Hall of Fame in 1971, again, in part because of the advocacy of Frankie Frisk and also of Bill Terry. Other ones thereafter was Ross Youngs, who was a teammate in the Giants with Bill Terry in the 1920s and 30s. He had a career WAR of only 32.7. George Kelly was another teammate of theirs and had a career WAR of just 25.9. And then Freddie Lindstrom, who made it in 1976, had a career WAR of just 28.3. As a result of this, kind of the cronyism that was going on at that time within the Veterans Committee, and I think they're still part of it sometimes to this day, because that's sometimes how it's accused of, like, Harold Baines got into the Hall of Fame was the advocacy of Reinsdorf, who's on the committee. But due in part, like, the actions of, Frank Frisk and also Bill Terry, who I think to their part, they played with these guys. So I think they are going to be a little impartial and biased. And we didn't have a WAR statistic at the time that these guys were being considered for the Hall of Fame. So there was nothing to really kind of really weight them against their peers other than like career stats and just eye appeal. I think at that point, did the guy feel or look like a Hall of Famer? This one gave you a little bit more of a complex metrics to say why when we got WAR. But because of their actions, Jim Bottomley made it to the Hall of Fame. And, he and 6 others I mentioned now were kind of like the low-level Hall of Famers that kind of got on there. But as a result of that, they revamped the Veterans Committee a little bit and gave them a little less power in some sense. So I don't think they had the ability to easily vote in so many multiple players at once. Granted, just recently, I think there were some accusations, obviously, of like advocating for Harold Baines to be included in there, which I kind of agree with, even though he's a great White Sox player, but doesn't really kind of fit like the luster, I think, of some Hall of Famers. But he's a Hall of Famer nevertheless. So that's the story of Jim Bottomley. I just thought it might be kind of interesting and wanted to kind of, again, show off his Diamond Star card, which is a set I'm kind of working on, and that's kind of his story. So feel free to let me know if you like the video, comment below, and I'm going to be kind of probably working on a few more of these kind of going forward, in addition to presenting some complete sets, and then a few things that might come in the mail in the next couple months. The big card show I'm looking forward to is the Chicago Sports Spectacular in March, and I hope to be working on my vintage sets at that show, so I want to be able to kind of save up my hobby bucks to be able to do so. All right, guys, have a great rest of your weekend, and we'll see you soon.